Hello and welcome to episode 212 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Manchester. Saying that for the first time makes me smile. And with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps. Good morning, Shane.
Dave, whose pirate signal has infiltrated our precious broadcast?
It's a hacker. I don't know what happened. This is so strange.
Hacker man is here.
Also, it's daytime. We've never done this in the daytime. I don't think we've ever done one in the daytime.
I don't think we've ever done one at 9 a.m. my time, 10 a.m. your time, Dave. We're looking a little frazzled.
4 p.m. my time. Yeah, you guys look like you just rolled out of bed. I've had a whole day.
You still look like you just rolled out of bed, though, weirdly.
Well, that's kind of the look that we're going for here.
Stan, you have a mug, even. You have a mug. What's in your mug?
It's tea. I'm drinking tea. I'm a tea drinker now.
Oh, my gosh.
Not already.
The Queen's black tea.
It's a cat mug, though. It's
Earl Grey.
Wow.
Shane, you would like this mug. That's right. Also with us, the Godfather, Dave Harbarger. Hello, lads. You all right?
Isn't it?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for asking.
Cheers.
How's our boy, Stan?
Yeah, not bad. Assimilating, aren't I? Every day I learn a new turn of phrase.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite one so far?
What's all this then?
Still.
Did I actually say that?
No one says that, but I said it, and they seem to accept it. I guess they don't say in it that much around here. I have heard it a couple times, but maybe that's more of a London thing, and I'm in the north, which is a very different culture. People say cheers. Oh, you know what drives my wife kind of crazy is that people say see you later in all instances, even if it's a total stranger checking you out at the grocery store. You'll just say,
really?
Thank you, and they'll say, see you later.
What?
See you later then, love.
They don't use I thought the official Britishism was smell you later.
I am completely frazzled, of course, because I've been up for 4 hours with my children. This is just what I look like on a Sunday during the day, unshowered, hair sticking straight up in the air. You guys have never seen me in the day. I'm wearing glasses. It's a lot. I can hear children yelling at each other in the next room. Hopefully the listeners can't hear that.
No.
I think you look good.
Well, Stanislav,
Shane,
we have you back. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
So are you even ready? Are you even ready for Magic? Are you ready for podcasting?
I've been playing a little bit, just trying to get my feet wet and stay somewhat current. It has been hard to play when you're moving internationally, but I found a way every couple of weeks to just play a little bit of Moto. I haven't made it out to a shop yet, but I'm actually planning to do that this upcoming Friday, so the day after the episode comes out. Probably going to do my first FNM. And I have bought cards. In fact...
Is it a burn meta out there?
I don't know yet. I have to go to a Pioneer FNM.
What are you going to play in Pioneer, Stan?
Well, what do we have here? A Nykthos.
Can't tell.
Oh, no. What?
Play Red Devotion?
In order to play what's here in my heavy play box.
Elves.
Elves.
A Dwynen's Elite. Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
For a moment, I was worried we were going to have a real heel turn there, and you were going to be like, yeah, I have Mono Green Devotion now. I'm fully into it. Nope, no big deal.
Stan, does Elves and Pioneer, I guess we could just talk about this later, but does Elves and Pioneer, is that running Tyvar?
No.
Oh, no. Not like this.
No, maybe not yet. I'm playing the list that won a Pioneer Challenge a month ago. That's kind of what I put together. I figured that's where I'll start. Maybe the deck has changed in that month, but we'll find out the hard way.
I mean, they've been trying Tyvar in it, but Devin, our new friend since you moved away, Stan Devin, told us he didn't think Tyvar was very good.
My new best friend.
In Elves. He said it was kind of not that great in Elves for what it's worth. You can check that out on a previous episode of the show.
I will say, listening to the show as a fan for the last, 2 months? No.
Close to 2 months, yeah.
It has been a real treat. You guys run a tight ship, and the podcast is good. You forget how good the podcast is when you're in it. But when you step back and you get to listen to the Dive Down, like a citizen might, it's really, really special. So you guys were doing great. You had awesome guests. Devin was amazing. Sky, it was great to hear Sky again. But Devin coming back for a twofer was perfect. So keep up the great work, because I'm never coming back.
I felt like the last episode was better without me and you, Stan. I think it's just
how it works, isn't it?
The Dave Devin show.
Probably should be.
Devin, call me. I know you're listening. I tell you, on the inside, it's felt pretty frantic the last couple of months. For what it's worth, on my side, it feels like running every week from like show to show, recording to recording, subject to subject, being like, oh my God, we finished another one. Yeah.
So since we did finish another one, what are we doing this week?
Yeah, what are we doing this week?
Let's catch up as friends. Let's set aside a little bit of time to hear from one another.
We're not done with
More
that
than the
already?
6 minutes we've done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have so many more anecdotes to tell you about the town I live in that is 700 years old.
I'm all ears.
My goodness. Okay.
Imagine that. There are plaques that say so.
Maybe we'll do a little wind down after the end of this whole thing. But what we wanted to do this week was I promised last week on the show that we were not going to talk about Pioneer really this episode. And then instead we're going to talk about Modern as much as possible because we have been not really paying attention to it. And this week is the Manatraders finals for this month, which happens to be Modern. So we get a little bit of content around that. But we're gonna check back in on Modern, talk about new decks that might be trending, talk about results from challenges on Magic Online as a source of a little bit of data, and talk a little bit about the couple of things that we've been playing, those of us that have been playing. We're going to go from there. But first, we're going to do housekeeping.
Who's going to do housekeeping? Stan, you coming back for some housekeeping too?
Well, it's a lonely house to keep. We don't have any new patrons or increased tiers, though we do have a very generous new review from Z283844746.
I hope that's not someone's phone number. Call it.
We don't know
It's
the
like
country code.
It's an auto population from Apple Podcasts. Like someone's just spamming reviews for us, making new accounts.
Yeah, Z283844746 said our show is dope. And I think
says they
this
love
review
rhinos.
is pretty dope too.
We did talk about Siege Rhino a bit last week, weirdly enough. And also we do talk about rhinos on this show a lot. So still your Rhino boys, of course. And this person says, I love rhinos, not as much turtles.
I love turtles. We have, hold on, Patreon. So if you want to support us fairly directly, there's a little bit of cut from the Patreon middleman, but you can go to patreon.com/thedivedown. You can throw us as little as $1 an episode, helps keep us going as well. And you get some swag sent your way. You get access to the Definitively Discreet Dive Down Discord, an awesome community of folks constantly talking about Magic and other things, of course. You can also support us, again, fairly directly from our store, where you can get things like hats, t-shirts, hoodies, fanny packs, socks. I don't know, we should add some socks. We should get some Bombas. Dive Down Bombas.
Sure.
Can
And of
you do
course,
that, Dave?
the crowning jewel of our store, which is the Rhino Boyz t-shirt, thanks to Tower
Yes.
Slayer at Tower Slayer on Twitter. Go check out our pixelated selves riding on rhinos. It's still the most popular page on our entire website.
thedivedown.com/store.
I own some Bombas socks. Have you guys ever worn Bombas? They're good.
Yeah, they are good.
I got a pair of Bombas for Christmas, actually, just like a random pair of Bombas, and it's like the low cut ones. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with them, but they're nice and soft.
Bombas.
Do they have that flap along your Achilles heel? Are they that low that they have that extra Achilles flap?
I don't know. I don't remember. I wear them around the house.
I have not heard about the Achilles flap on any of the podcasts I listen to that are sponsored by Bombas, and that's what I was going to say.
Notice we mentioned it though.
Right, Bombas. We do good product reads. Sponsor our podcast, Bombas.
You think they just have random people like listening to podcasts, like just like looking for ad placement potential?
No, but you never know what brand manager is into Magic the Gathering and needs a little goosing.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
But anyway, we also, like I said, we have the store. We have Manatraders. If you use Magic Online, if you don't want to pay for your cards through botnets and things like that, you can rent them through Manatraders botnet. Manatraders.com. You sign up code TheDiveDown10 for 10% off your first 2 months of service.
Bearstern Man, still a sponsor. Love to see it.
Were you able to bring Bearstern Man products into the country with you? Did you get through customs with the bergamot?
Oh yeah. I even brought my safety razor and loose razor blades and a bunch of Bearstern Man soaps and shaving soaps. Of course.
Culture really is advancing at this point. You love to see it. And finally, Nerd Rage Gaming. Check them out. Get some cards. Get 8% off if you use the code DIVE8 just because we're friends. That's it.
I miss Nerd Rage. I miss that 8% discount. I don't get that here. Axiom, because I ordered a card from Axiom, they gave me £5 for my next order as a thank you for being a new customer. But I don't think that's because I'm a podcaster. I think that's just because I'm a marketing target.
Sounds like you have another sponsor that we could add to the list. Axiom Gaming, get at us. Call us. Call me Axiom.
We sound really thirsty this episode. But Stanislav, while we're here, what are card prices like in the UK or Europe? My understanding is that there's some fairly big deltas between the US and like Europe.
Yeah, so I can talk about this at length now that I've actually had to buy a bunch of cards to finish this deck. Cardmarket.com, which is their version of TCG Player, is interesting because it gives you access to all of Europe, so it's a lot easier to buy foreign cards too. But the prices on Card Market are so low. It was kind of insane how low they were. Bigger retailers like Axiom, the numbers are closer to the numbers you might see in the States.
Okay.
But I would say that like you can actually get a huge deal on stuff on Card Market. Because what I was doing is I found several retailers in England. I wanted to buy some cards. I didn't want to get them from the continent. And I was just comparing Card Market prices to Axiom and Troll Trader and some of the other ones. And Card Market would be like more than £1 cheaper. It would be like 15, sometimes 20% cheaper.
So I should just be ordering cards from you like in bulk and then you just ship them over.
Yeah, man. Or next time I'm in the States, like there's probably something to be said there.
Oh yeah. Smuggle some cards in.
Getting some cheap European cardboard.
Love it. You know, I realize I don't think we actually mentioned the Barrister Man code, which is the Dive Down 2023 for 15% off your first order, by the way. And there's some good things to order. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Awesome.
So 15 minutes. We're through housekeeping.
We did talk about card prices.
MTG Finance Podcast. Here we are.
Dave.
Yes.
I see a lot of notes in the breakdown section, and it looks like you did some hard work.
I do have some. So I think as we talk about getting back into Modern, I realized over the past couple of weeks, I didn't even really know what was going on with Modern since the advent of one, or kind of what has come to pass so far from cards from Phyrexia All Will Be One. So I wanted to start somewhere to just give us a quick discussion about what's going on in the meta game, stuff we've missed, what might be trending up, trending down, that kind of stuff. So what I did was I went through the challenge, every challenge since February 10th through February 24th, which is like 7 or 8 events. I only did challenges. It was a sample of around 175 decks and did a metagame breakdown on those decks that made it into the top 32s of each one of those events, because those are the decks that get shared with us, as everybody knows. And so we'll talk a little bit about the Manatraders metagame, since some of that stuff is coming out right now while we're talking too. But it seemed like we could talk about the top 15-ish decks from Modern really quickly and just look at how things are shaking out right now. I will guide us through this discussion in brackets so we don't just read a table to everybody.
Oh, that's what we do so well, though. We read pivot tables. We read about numbers. Dave, do you see Stanislav just like casually, idly messing with his new deck?
I'm into it. Sleeve some cards, bro. Get double, what do they call it? Multitasking? Multitasking.
Is my camera that wide? You guys saw me sleeving cards?
We see your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
that's okay.
Stan.
That Nykthos I just flashed, I had to put it in a sleeve as quickly as possible. I don't want cards just floating around here.
Oh, yeah. Please don't.
Are you using the heavy play sleeves?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I haven't gotten them yet, and because I didn't want to use the demo ones, and I haven't got my Kickstarter ones yet. But I intend to.
I have my Lotus Field deck in those, and I need to actually play it in real life to actually use them.
There you go.
But anyway.
All right, so let's get into it. All right, the top tier of the meta, the first top 2 decks, will not surprise you or anybody, but here's what they are. It is Murktide Regent and Rakdos Midrange were the top 2 decks in the top 32s of all these challenges that I looked at.
Oh, are we just saying that Rakdos Midrange is just like an expected like number 2 at this point?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, I know it's been popular and rising and stuck around for months and months and months after being considered kind of a scam in itself. But I guess this is just where we are. Just, a Rakdos Midrange has been sticking at number 2, huh?
I think it's been top 4 at least for 6 months. So I don't think we should be surprised that now it's top 2. And let me give you the percentages of these, because I think that was the part that was a bit of a surprise, is that out of the decks in these top 32s, Murktide Regent is 17% of the decks in the top 32s of challenges, and Rakdos Midrange is 10.76%. And I would tell you, Goldfish is underreporting that Rakdos number if you look at it, because there are a number of decks that are basically Rakdos mid-range that have some tweaks that are not getting labeled as Rakdos mid-range. I found enough decks in the sample to move it from less than 9% and then when I went back and renamed everything, it's closer to 11%, 10.76.
Yeah, like frequently they will like miscategorize something because it has like that the blue card that when you discard, like, you know, for the anti-creativity blue sideboard card, and it'll just be like, oh, you have one blue card.
Correct. Yeah, and that's most of the errors I found was a bunch of Rakdos mid-range decks being just called UBR because of Orvar, the all form in the sideboard. And so I don't think there's a lot to say about Murktide. Does anybody have anything that they want to say about Murktide right now?
I mean, this probably doesn't surprise Stan at 17% because I know Stan has always considered Murktide to be really, really good. But like, you know, just every time we look at the stats of Murktide, it doesn't display itself to be like the 17% of the top 32 meta deck. But then, you know, here it is. And that's what continually surprises me is just the consistency and apparent power level of Murktide when it's always hovered around kind of a 50% deck, more or less. But I guess in the hands of better players and with enough sample, you know, thrown at the wall, you can get to that 17% for sure. I know it's a popular and enjoyable deck for a lot of people.
Yeah. And the big thing is here, no new cards from Phyrexia all will be won that I was able to see in my quick meta analysis. Now, quick is what I'm putting here. I did not really go through every single Murktide list. That would have been like 35 lists if I had done that, but I did not see any notable new cards in the list. Also worth noting that Murktide was 10% of the Manatraders, you know, finals breakdown as well. So 26 people brought Murktide to that particular tournament as well. Rakdos Midrange had a couple of interesting things that I saw from the lists. One was, as you said, a lot of them have Orvar in the sideboard to help with creativity. You know, creativity was gone, but we'll be talking about not gone. It was less popular for a moment. Now it's gotten more popular again. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I think we might see more Orvar floating around. I'm not totally sure. Is that really that effective against creativity? Stan, have you got to play that card or seen it happen?
Neither.
Yeah.
I think it's good if you have multiples, but yeah, I don't know. The trigger sequence favorably on your side, and then because creativity is sorcery speed, you're the one who ends up with the Archons in the end.
Right. But wow, it's such a silver bullet, right? To be like, I'm just have this card, it's only good in this matchup. I'm never using it for anything else. And it's not even a card I can play, which is... So it must be pretty good if people are willing to do it, but
it like awkwardly has to be in your hand at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. So weird stuff. The other thing I saw as far as new cards go is that I have seen some Children's Edicts showing up in the sideboard as scam. It's worth noting that Dom Harvey made the Manatraders top 8, which we'll talk about a little bit later today. No, he did not have that card in his deck for what it's worth. And I also saw at least one Mardu mid-range deck that was only splashing red for Nahiri, a full playset of 4 Nahiri, the Unforgiving. So I dubbed the Unforgiving. I didn't see a lot of people trying that, but I thought it was interesting. You got to get Nahiri high up to bring back those elementals with her, though.
So I pulled up MTG Meta.io out of curiosity to see how Rakdos Scam is doing against some of the top decks during basically the same period that we're looking at right now. And I wonder if part of the reason it's on the up and up is because it has a favorable Murktide matchup. And Murktide being maybe the most popular deck in the format helps contribute to the rise of Rakdos especially.
Yeah. What's that matchup look like to you when you look at IO, which isn't always like the best data, but it's something at least. It's not perfect, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's 55% across 20 matches, but it's also like 60% against Hammer. And and apparently 100%, only 3 matches though, against Elementals. So maybe that says something about where Scam is getting its leverage.
Scam's a good deck. Let's talk about some decks that have some new leverage though as well, I think. So in 3rd and 4th place were 2 decks that were at 6.25% each. One of them is not surprising. The other one was surprising to me. So I'm going to start with the not surprising one. Indomitable Creativity back as the number 3rd/4th deck in the meta. All 4C builds. I didn't see any that weren't 4C. It's pretty standard. Other than that, there are a few that have Atraxa in them from Phyrexia All Will Be One, either in main as like a one-of, as just a secondary target for creativity, or in the side. I think that the thing that's interesting about Atraxa is that it's probably more easy to cast Atraxa out of creativity to hard cast it than it is to hard cast an Archon, honestly. So it's interesting that people are going with that, especially the way that's worked. But pretty much it's the same deck as it was now. As for why it's on the rise, I also pulled up MTG Meta.io and looked at some stuff here for this. And I think that it has a lot to do with Hammer. Creativity seems to be pretty good against Hammer, at least according to that data. And also Breach, which it seems to have a lot of good matchups against, which I was a little surprised about, but that's what that data indicated, was that it had a good, 55% plus matchup against Underworld Breach for what it's worth. Breach is still a pretty popular deck, although it's many different decks, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the last thing that creativity is good against is the other deck in this category, which is Omnath. And so Omnath is on the rise as well.
Did you get a sense for which flavor of Breach is the most popular? Are you looking at Jund, 4-color?
For Underworld Breach?
Or, I'm sorry, creativity.
Creativity is definitely 4-color. It's almost, I think every single list I saw was 4-color. I don't remember seeing a non-4-color, 4/5-color one.
Gotcha. So this like Jund version with Bitter Reunion, that's still kind of on the outskirts?
Yeah, I definitely think it's on the outskirts, at least as far as stuff that's making it into the challenge top 32s. I definitely didn't see one of those. There might have been some of those that were running Bitter Reunion that I missed as again, glancing through this 200 decks, but yeah.
For sure.
But I think that's the big surprise. On the other deck that is on the rise and is third or fourth in meta representation is Omnath. And this is another deck that it's not totally clear if you just look at Goldfish or something like that to see what it is, because some people call it 4C, some people call it 5C Omnath, some people call it other things, or they end up being tagged as other things in that automated system. And so I went through and removed all those qualifiers and just had it decks like that with Omnath that are reminiscent of the old Yorion decks. They're just called Omnath in the spreadsheet that I did, and that added up to 6.25% of the meta for third/fourth place.
And I'm assuming these are all Kahira decks? Omnath Kahira?
Yeah, they're almost all Kahira decks.
So how are these playing out? They just kind of like the standard sort of like multicolor, mid-range control-ish type style, or?
They're exactly they're 60 card they're basically 60 card Omnath, like the decks that we had without Yorion. A bunch of asterisks on that I will get to in a moment. But the big thing that's happening here is that a lot of these decks are running 1 or 2 Elish Norn Mother of Machines main.
Oh, okay.
And so I actually think that this card might be helping them in some matchups that were not that good. And also, it's just a really good card. You can search it up as a target, and it doubles your triggers. It gets rid of other people's triggers. I think it just randomly hoses some decks. So this seems to be the home for Elish Norn in Modern, and kind of surprised. Like, I want to say I'm surprised, but at the same time, I'm like, of course this deck would be able to pick up Elish Norn and just play it.
We mentioned this in the spoiler app, right? Like that Elish Norn is surprisingly hard to kill in Modern. Like, you have to have like a Terminate or something like that, or a Dreadbore if you're playing something like that. But otherwise, this card is not dying to much.
Yeah. And I'd like to point out, on the spoiler episode, I said something about it dying to Leyline Binding. It does not die to Leyline Binding. It randomly hoses any permanent. Any permanent coming in the battlefield does not cause something to trigger, right? It's not cause things to trigger. And that means that it even hoses like Sigarda's Aid. Like, because I think that the trigger on that doesn't work against it as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I think that Elish Norn just randomly hoses a bunch of decks that are trying to do powerful things. Classically, creativity's been a pretty good matchup against these Omnath decks. And, maybe that helps you get some points back going the other way, or it probably does help you get a lot of points back. And then the other thing that these decks are trying out is that many of these are playing Atraxa as well as just an ultimate giant recovery card, blocker, lifelink, and also draws you a bunch of cards in this deck, because your deck has sorceries, instants, enchantments, lands, creature. Like, it has a lot of card types in it, so you can get a bunch of cards off of a cast Atraxa. Now, a few of them are only playing a couple of them, but 1 or 0 is kind of the number. But that's an interesting card in this shell too.
And what, you're just naturally casting it once you get to 7 mana?
Yeah. Well, you're omnathing into it is what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's just a good mana sink.
Wild.
And here's the last thing, the most annoying thing, if anybody has any questions or thoughts about this. Back when Yorion was banned, I was like, there's no way people are going to play more than 60 card mains, 15 card sideboards in this deck. I don't know what's going on, if it's like a Twitter troll, like if it's a meme thing, but there are a bunch of people who are playing with this deck and just laughing all the way to the bank with more than 75 card total builds. So Claudio has an 82 card result, 26th place in one of the challenges at 4-3. A player called Nameless with a 4 instead of an A had a 90 card result, 31st place. Gucci Life, 85 card deck for 15th place. Batutina had a 95 card list that they played with. These people are just playing. They're just playing more than 75 cards. The kids are playing more than 75 cards out here.
Deck size is a resource, as they say.
I guess. I don't know.
Huh. What's the draw there? Just like that we have access to more Eladamri's call targets. Like, it just doesn't matter at this point. Like, all the cards are good, so...
I mean, the contention from people was the mana works better if you have a bunch of extra lands in your deck. So I think that it's better fetching targets would probably be one thing people are thinking about. And then, yeah, I think the other side is you're drawing a bunch of cards and you can search things up that I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's a troll or what, but nobody won with one of these. At least I don't think so. I don't think Batutina won, but yeah. But Omnath's back. Omnath is also, for what it's worth, we were looking at the Manatraders meta as well. Omnath was basically the number 2 deck in Manatraders as far as registration go. 24 people brought it, so it was just shy of Murktide. Indomitable Creativity was 17 players brought it for 9% of the field. So the top 3 decks in Manatraders were Murktide, Omnath, and Creativity, which is, wow. That's like a meta from 5 months ago, if I ever heard it.
Yeah, that's wild.
Something I'm seeing for the first time right now is that Elish Norn is a very expensive Magic card.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's both, it's EDH and somewhat constructed playable, as we're seeing.
It must be more than just EDH for it to be because there's so many printings of it, and it's a $43 card.
Yeah.
That must mean that it's like seeing play across formats.
It definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also just, I mean, it also literally just is like, I can't imagine a more EDH mythic, you know what I mean? No matter how many variants there are.
Yeah. Card's good. This is just Shieldred. I mean, it's potential is for it to just be like Shieldred-esque, although Shieldred's probably easier to play in multiples than Elish Norn is, so we'll see. But, it's a $40 card. It's a flagship mythic of a standard set. $40.
I have some Phyrexia boosters here that Wizards Europe sent me. Should we try to open one? See if we can get.
Sure. That's fun.
Wow.
Let's take a break.
As soon as he gets to Europe, he gets the promo swag.
I know, it's unbelievable.
They were waiting for me at the airport with a sign that said podcaster.
It said Polygon writer and podcaster and new resident Stanislav.
We can save it for the end of the episode.
Okay. Let's go to the next
I want to
tier.
know one. I want to know one right now.
Let's open one. It's fine. It's a break.
Yeah.
I want to hear that wrapper.
Post.
Put that wrapper near the mic.
Do you have a collector booster, or are they just set boosters?
I do have a collector booster.
Let's do the collector booster.
I opened the set booster.
Okay, that's fine. We'll do the collector at the end.
We'll do both. Okay.
Stan does have red hot luck when it comes to packs.
Oh, Elish Norn.
I will say I did open 2. Oh, that's a pretty good card. I have opened.
There's 8 no laws when you're playing Miglaws.
That card's
Miglaws. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Perfect open.
Minor misstep. Did that turn out to be anything?
No.
Great.
A little bit.
We'll open a collector's booster in the wind down.
Yeah. I will say, for what it's worth, I've opened 2 Elish Norns so far, so I think I'm set there.
Were they the same printing, or did you get one in an odd foreign language that doesn't actually have a proper translation?
You mean like Phyrexian?
Yeah, that's the one.
No, I have 2 normal set Elish Norns, which is nice because that's the printing I prefer when it comes to Magic cards, mostly. Unlike Tyvar, where I have a regular one, a showcase one, and a foil regular one right now. So, that's always fun for deck building. Anyway, next tier down, the 5th and 6th place decks were also the exact same number in my sample. And they're sort of like a pair of decks that hate each other. At least one of them hates the other one. And that would be Hammer Time at 4.86% of the meta. Hammer's trending down a little bit. It was number 2 for a long time towards the end of the year last year, the beginning of the year this year. I think that it was probably closer to 8-10% of the meta mostly when we did this stuff, and now being down around 5, it's interesting. No one is picking up new cards for this list. Like, nobody's picking up Nahiri in this list. We saw a person get a 5-0 with that early on. I've tried Hammer with Nahiri in it. It didn't seem like it made any difference to the deck at all. To me, like, it seemed like not really what you want to be wasting your time on. There's some mono white decks. There's some blue white decks. I think people still like Hammer. Shane was in the chat last night telling us that Hammer is broken.
It's still so absurd. Like, it feels so absurd. Like, it just keeps hitting you with hammers.
Yeah. Even in the tournament practice rooms, it's good.
I will say that there's one weird thing going on with this deck, and that is X-File, who's a player, Felix Slew, is the player that goes by X-File online, I believe. I don't think they have a Twitter anymore because I was looking for that. So I did some work last night. They've been playing a bit lately with, and a couple other people have picked this up, a Hammer deck. Here's what I saw on this Hammer list last night, and tell me what you think about this. A one of Thassa's Oracle in Hammer, along with 4 of a card called Pure Sight Marrow from Lorwyn block. Okay? So I'm looking at these lists and I'm like, why is this here? Is this a stipulation? Is this a joke? Then I found it a second time and I was like, what is going on here? I had to go deep on Google, you all, to figure this one out. So I thought that it was like a one of tech against mill or something, like, oh, you're going to mill me out and then I'm going to play Thassa's Oracle and survive, which is like not actually possible.
Should we read Pure Sight Marrow?
Yep, I'm going to read it right now.
Okay.
So here's because that was the thing that was. I thought that maybe Pure Sight Marrow was just for value and Thassa's Oracle was the thing, but here's what Pure Sight Marrow does. So its cost is hybrid blue white. It's a Merfolk Wizard. It's a 2/2, and it says blue white hybrid. The untap symbol. Look at the top card of your library. You may exile that card. Okay, it has the untap symbol on it. And here's the thing I didn't notice about this deck with it in it at first is that this deck is also running Paradise Mantle. So what you can do is search up Paradise Mantle, put it onto Pure Sight Marrow, and you can mill your whole deck immediately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what you're doing there is adding a weird Saga-able combo, because you can get Paradise Mantle with the Saga. You just maybe you draw into Pure Sight Marrow. The Pure Sight Marrow helps you get to your Thassa's Oracle, but I'm not exactly sure how I didn't see any extra cards that would like help X-File draw the Thassa's Oracle off the top. You know what I mean? If you got to it too early when you're in the middle of milling your whole decks. But I'm sure that there's some way to do it that I just maybe missed in the list. But yeah, Hammer with an infinite combo, an infinite self-mill combo randomly popping up, which is a weird thing. So in case you see it, there's at least one pretty good player, really good player actually, out there trying to figure out if that's a thing. I figure that this might help in some of Hammer's worst matchups, like maybe a matchup where you can't get early damage in. I don't know if it helps in like Titan necessarily, but it is a way to win without having to go through blockers, though Titan probably still kills you faster than you can do this. But I don't know. Just was kind of an interesting thing that I noticed.
You can draw cards with Reality Chip in Hammer Time, and it looks like X-File is playing one chip.
Yeah. So chip was part of it too, but then you have to get 2 pieces of equipment to make it work, and so I don't know. It didn't seem like enough, but
I mean, really importantly, Pure Sight Marrow features my favorite reminder text of this is the untap symbol.
Yeah.
Don't
get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. All right, so look out for that. And then the other deck in this category, the 4.86 category, around 5% of the meta, is Mill. Mill itself.
Okay. Dave, did you see Mill kind of like, has it, I know it was fairly popular when I was doing kind of a few weeks ago when we didn't even touch it with Devin on the episode, the Modern breakdown. And that was kind of in reaction a lot to Amulet kind of having a huge resurgence because of the land that I forgot the name of.
Mycosynth Gardens.
That's it. The Gardens.
Yeah.
It's becoming spring. But has it fallen off in the past few weeks, where mill is kind of not super hot, or is it still staying there?
It's still pretty hot. I feel like it was pretty consistent through the whole sample. And the most interesting thing about the whole couple of weeks is that at the beginning there was a mix of people playing Jace the Perfected Mind and people not playing Jace the Perfected Mind. Yeah. And now everybody's playing at least 3 copies of Jace the Perfected Mind as the deck continues to do reasonably well. I'll note that nobody brought Mill within the top 6 decks to Manatraders, but Hammer Time was the 4th deck at 8% of the field in Manatraders.
So Jace hit. Jace actually hit. It's a Planeswalker for Mill that people were like, yeah, let's see if it works in Mill, and apparently it is doing work. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised about it, but it does seem to be the standard in that deck, and it seems to be getting people to pick it back up. Notably, Demonic Tutors was playing it in challenges for a little bit, getting off Yawgmoth and trying that instead, and had tweeted about liking it over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, it seems like a good amount of people are playing it. For what it's worth, I also saw some Azorius and Mono Blue Mill decks that kind of were in this same zone, but I consolidated them together into this number. So it mostly Dimir, we're talking 90% Dimir, but there are people doing other stuff here too. Okay, gonna keep going until we go fast. Next up, Burn at 4.5%. Same deck. Sorry, Burn. You're still 7th place. Still not too interesting. It is what it is. But Burn players keep going. After that comes Crashing Footfalls, comes our friends at 4.8 or 3.82% of the meta. So we're getting down to that less than 5% slice. Crashing Footfalls being 8th is interesting here. It was 5th in the Manatraders meta. It was 8% of the meta there. But the thing that stuck out to me most about what I'm seeing Crashing Footfalls right now, as far as these go, is that almost every single deck except for one that I saw from this sample was Teamer. Just Teamer.
Yes, I've noticed this as well.
Stan, what do you think about this right now?
So I'm looking at the Bullwinkle list that won a Modern Challenge on February 25th.
Oh,
so I guess that's this past Friday, right?
Yeah, and that's not in this sample. So interesting to note that
it's not even there. So the next one the next best performing one is Rinbo, which finished 8th place. And really what I'm looking for is how many times people are playing Become Immense, because it kind of became the flavor of the week for a minute, but less so now. My thinking was simply that Teamer, with Become Immense especially, can let you just win faster and play a faster strategy, as opposed to the 4-color decks, which maybe can cascade more frequently, but also are relying on a little bit more interaction to play a grindier game.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there was this moment shortly after I left the pod when Rhinos became really good and popular everywhere. I don't know if you guys noticed that too.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if people started responding to that, the deck would have to adapt by just getting more alpha strikey, and can't really necessarily dirtle with the 4-color decks, and needed silver bullets and things like Blood Moon, and needed alpha strikes from Become Immense in order to just continue to hang. But I'm not seeing that many Become Immense here either. I'm seeing a version with Repudiate, Replicate, and Valakut Awakening. So
what?
Maybe
I didn't
it's just
see that one.
That's the one that finished 8th.
Interesting. Also
on the 25th. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, that stuff would have been in the sample if I had access to it yesterday when I was doing the work, So that's just the difference between today and yesterday. What's Repudiate, Replicate again? Is that the Simic?
Yes.
Yes. Guilds of Ravnica card?
Yeah, so Repudiate is Simic, counter target activated or triggered ability, and then Replicate is 1 blue-green, create a token as a copy of target creature you control.
Oh, geez. So it's basically like Stifle plus... Yeah. Plus make another Rhino. All right, 9th place deck. Big surprise to me here is that, when 1 came out, Phyrexia All Will Be 1, everybody thought the Mycosynth Gardens and Amulet Titan were going to break Modern. Of these top 32s, yes. Amulet Titan was 9th place in the decks that I saw with 3.47%. Many decks that have good matchups against Amulet and bad matchups against Amulet, higher in the meta representation here. Maybe people aren't picking it up, but I think mostly it's just maybe not quite as broken, although it's clearly a good card. Everybody's playing it.
Yeah, I mean, Titan's doing well. Like Modern 20, the challenge on 219, it's in 3rd and 19th place. In the prelims, it's like 3rd, 1st, 8th in two different prelims. There's 4 different Amulet Titan variants in the league dump on the 21st. How's that even possible? That's wild. It's still like showing up and doing fine, but yeah, like you said, it's not like, it's not even Murktide level where it's like one copy in the top 32 instead of like 3 to 4 of some of our most popular decks that we typically see.
Yep, exactly. So Titan, good. Got some stuff from Phyrexia all we want, as we all know, but I think it's solidly back, but not anything people should be crazy scared of, I think, at this point. Okay, and then I'm going to go through the rest of the top 15 really quick. There's 6 decks, because we've been through 9 so far. So these are all right around 3% of the meta. I'm just going to read it off. Underworld Breach, that is non-grinding station Breach. That's the most popular one right now. It's Jeskai mostly, occasionally is it, but they're almost all Jeskai Value Breach, no grinding stations at this point for this 3% of the meta. You want to talk about that one? Stan, you had a question about which breach was the most popular. Any other follow-up about it?
No, my question was about which creativity was the most popular.
Oh, creativity. Oh, sorry. Yeah, got it backwards. Well, just so everybody knows, that's the most popular Underworld Breach right now. There's Gruul Storm Breach, and there's like a Rot Priest deck I saw that uses Breach, and some other stuff that was floating around. But the Underworld Breach, if we added up the Gruul versions, the Teamer versions, the Izzet versions, the Jeskai versions, it would actually be closer to like 6 or 7% of the meta, but I do think the difference between grinding station and non-grinding station breaches enough that I just left them as separate decks in this sample, because I do think they play pretty differently, but don't get it twisted. There are still, 6, 7, 8% of the decks in this meta that are playing Underworld Breach as an important card in their deck. And that even goes up higher if you look at the 14th place deck on here, which is Jeskai Prowess, which is just basically it's Prowess with Breach and some white cards for removal, and it's doing well right now. It had some high level finishes. It's a cool deck. I saw some people talking about it on Twitter. Of course, it's the deck I'm the most interested in out of this bracket, but we don't have to talk about it more than here. Just know that it's around 3% of the meta right now too, and it also uses Breach. So there are a lot of decks using Underworld Breach in different ways still right now. Living End was also 3% of the meta, as was Yawgmoth. Mono Red Midrange was 2.4%, and then Domain Zoo is the 15th place deck with 2% of that top 15 meta. Any thoughts about this list looking at it real quick?
I guess my major things are just kind of like, I'm a little bit surprised at kind of like the lack of adoption of Breach, or maybe it's just one of those things where people are able to respond to a strategy like Breach and, keep these things under some kind of containment. It's decks like this we've seen in the past where, we talked about early Breach decks, right? Like early Breach decks, people were, doing these really sort of fragile combos where like they had potential to win on like turn 2 or turn 3 with certain combinations of cards, but then, it's fairly easy to attack those kind of glass cannon strategies. And while we know that Breach now is much more kind of like a value strategy, I think it still does rely fairly heavily, especially like the value ones, where it's kind of like, I'm going to cast a bunch of stuff out of my graveyard and kind of chip in with some prowessy style creatures. We know very well, like with a certain amount of removal or graveyard hate, that those decks aren't going to be able to be as explosive or as have the redundancy to cast like 3 lightning bolts off the same card. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think that these are the kind of strategies that if they rear their head and kind of show their power level, that people can tap them back down quite a little bit there.
You kind of glossed over Mono Red Midrange.
Yeah, those are basically Obosh, M. Hayashi style decks, I would say. They don't include things like what's that card? Calibrated Blast, the second artifact, take 5 damage. Those are actually a separate deck list, and that showed up around 1% of the meta, 1.5% of the meta, so it's just outside of the top 15. But I did gloss over it. It's just, there's always a certain portion of Hayashi style decks in these, and they're always around this place, like 10 to 15%.
Right. I just think it's interesting that like it's not 0, and it's more popular than Domain Zoo in the sample size.
Yeah. They're cool decks. I mean, Obosh is a powerful card, and if you start playing they're infinitely like customizable if you want to play. They're almost all playing Seasoned Pyromancer, and many of them are playing Saga. Some of them aren't playing Saga. Like, there's just a lot of different ways to go with the deck, which is pretty cool. But it was tough to take anything from it other than to say these are here. They don't even have any new cards in them or anything like that I saw. For what it's worth, the Manatraders top 8 was Caprioso on Rakdos midrange. That's Dom Harvey. NBDF, Crashing Footfalls, which was a teamer version from what we're seeing anyway. The King 3603, Indomitable Creativity, a Jund build. I was just looking on Twitter and they mentioned that they love the Jund version. Casa on 5-color Indomitable Creativity. Arius on Omnath, Twinless Twin. We know Twinless Twin very well. Guess what they're playing? It's Murktide. Otakun on Omnath. And then the 8th place deck was Miskimbolic, Rakdos midrange. So we had 2 Rakdos midrange, 2 Creativity, 2 Omnath, 1 Footfalls, 1 Murktide in that top 8. All A+ decks.
So what are we learning from this, Dave? Do we have any conclusions?
I mean, my biggest conclusion is really just Omnath is back. Mm-hmm. And I think in a substantial way, and it's probably thanks to Elish Norm being good and maybe with a little bit of help from Atraxa as far as having some really good targets to use. Murktide is way bigger in these winner brackets than I thought. I thought Murktide would maybe be 10% of the winner's bracket, and it's 17% of it. I think there's less Amulet than I was thinking there was be, and there's way more mill. Honestly, than I thought there would be in these samples. But other than that, I think those are the main takeaways that I had. Oh, and there's a good amount of breach. It's just not consolidating around any single deck. Those are probably the 4 or 5 takeaways I would take from this.
Do we feel like this is a meaningful evolution for the format? Or are we still talking about the same Modern with just different decks sort of creeping up around the edges?
I think it's this. Yeah.
I guess the question is, like, have I missed anything if I haven't played Modern in 2 months?
And in fact, since you haven't played too much, I would say you haven't missed that much, other than there's some new tech in some of the decks that you should be aware of. Like we said, what we mentioned, Elish Norn randomly hoses some decks that Omnath couldn't hose before, right? Yeah. So that's something to be aware of depending on what deck you're on. But I think the meta still feels stable and it still feels like it's moving around a little bit, although Murktide's kind of always at the top representation-wise. There's still a lot of good decks. But yeah, I don't think the thing we should take away from this is I don't think one really impacted this format overall. It just gave people a few new toys to play with, I would say.
Yeah, cool.
So what are you playing? What are you thinking about playing? Like, when you look at this and you're like, if you wanted to go win an RCQ, are you doing anything differently? Stan, are you just being like, yeah, Crashing Footfalls can still win an event. That's a deck I know the best. Are you saying like, I really should learn Indomitable Creativity, or I should really go back to Murktide Regent and practice some more with that?
Well, it's always good to practice with Murktide Regent, but
yeah, because then you know how to play against like the most popular deck in the room.
Yeah, but
get better ideas.
But I don't know. Why would I play anything other than Teamer? That's my deck. I've spent too many American dollars on blinging it out.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree. I mean, I think it's also important to be realistic and just be like, hey, this deck still has chops. I'm not trying to hold on to Jund mid-range or something like that, like in the post-Modern Horizons era or something.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing for me is after I put a good amount of effort into learning about Hammer towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, I was pretty worried about if the deck was going to hang on in the meta, given more Titan, given more mill. I think right now the indication is that Hammer is still a reasonable choice to make. It might be less good for leagues than it is for a tournament, but it seems like it's okay to play. I mean, also, Breach is certainly in my book of stuff that I would play, whether it's the value one or if it's just prowess, essentially. And then finally, I think for me, Scam is the third deck that's still in my holster that I'm still happy playing.
Stan, while I've brought up the subject of rhinos, and we're not an episode of the Dive Down without talking about it, what do you think about Bullwinkle's tech in the first place deck from the 25th challenge, where they're playing 2 subtlety main? You think that's kind of a concession to the resurgence of Omnath and things like hey, I need to be able to take care of these powerful creatures before they hit the battlefield.
Well, it's not
buy
just
myself some time.
It's not just Omnath. Subtlety is sort of good against everything, right? Like it's really good against the card Murktide. You really like it against Ledger Shredder. I think against Scam, if we're talking about Scam getting more popular, that can be a pretty scary matchup. A early double grief can just be absolutely game ending. So having
you can't win.
Yeah, so having access to like Subtlety to pitch even like a Force of Negation or any of your countless other blue cards, like I think that might be a decent metagame call.
Yeah, I mean it's just an overall like pretty good card, and then I think in certain metas is almost an essential card, at least in the 75. So
yeah,
I'm happy to put 2 back in my main. Like I've got those hot borderless that I'm looking forward to using.
How about Bullwinkle's tech of the one of Emrakul Aeon's Torn in the sideboard? Is that
I mean we mentioned that a couple. Yeah, this is something that we didn't actually mention because I did a bunch, like I mentioned, I did a bunch of notes for an episode that we just focused entirely on Pioneer, and I just pointed out like 10 different times how people had Eldrazi or Gaia's Blessing in the side, just like as mill tech for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
you can naturally cast it. Get that 15 mana.
You'd rather not. Can you actually naturally cast it like with all your fetches? I'm honestly not sure. But
you're probably right. You probably can't.
No way.
Yeah. And I guess like with Gaia's Blessing, you don't want to cascade into that. Even if you're playing against mill, you'd rather cascade into Rhinos and then just like mill over an Emrakul.
You mean you don't want to cascade into put 3 cards from your graveyard back into your deck and gain 3 life or whatever Gaia's Blessing, the text of Gaia's Blessing is?
I don't think so. Maybe I'm overlooking something obvious. No, but I don't think that's what you want, David.
You certainly do not.
Isn't there a cheaper Eldrazi that has the, when it's put into your graveyard, shuffle your graveyard in your library that you could potentially hard cast that like would be strictly better than Emrakul the Aeon's Torn?
There is. It
like
is
a 10 mana one?
It is Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. That one is 11 mana. And then
that's much more reasonable.
I'm checking Kozilek Butcher of Truth. I think it's Kozilek Butcher of Truth 10. Is the one that's 10. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought that Ulamog was the one that was 10, but yeah, Kozilek's the one that's 10.
Look, I mean, take every edge you can.
That's right.
No, but anyway, yeah, I mean, I think like it's interesting to see the resurgence of Omnath. I hope that it doesn't. I mean, it's the kind of thing that it's for me rarely going to be like the same level of like Boogeyman as potentially like the Yorion version was, just because like the amount of value that could be created from that and like the inevitability of that value. But yeah, giant mid-range is always still kind of like scary to deal with. Omnath is just such a house. But yeah, sweet meta.
All right. So we're going to talk quickly after the break about a couple of decks that what Shane's been playing lately, maybe a couple of decks that I found in this metagame breakdown that were kind of Cool Decks Inc-ish, and then what Stan's been up to really quickly. So stay with us.
Stanislav,
Shane.
As Dave was asking earlier, you were able to travel with your Barrister and Man products. I'm very happy that they didn't confiscate your bergamot, the citrus in your backpack.
Well, I checked it in. I'm not bringing soap on a plane.
It's just too smelly. You don't want to have the aromatics.
I've seen Fight Club.
Soaps on a plane.
That's right.
But what I wanted to talk about today, I don't know if you received anything from Will before you took off in your long, arduous journey. But one of the things that I got recently was a sample of the Merlin shave soap. And I mentioned this last week, how I've been into it, and I think it's one of my favorites in the not fresh, like not like super sort of like bright and fruity and aquatic smell. This is more of like the softer, I wouldn't call it romantic, but in terms of like, warm, wintry type flavors, smells, I guess. But I guess you could eat it. Probably tastes pretty good. And the way that Barrister and Man describes Merlin is notes of amber, bergamot, of course you have to have the bergamot, cedar, leather, coriander, sandalwood, tobacco, and those are the things that I smell the most. Like I get a lot of like interesting sort of like cedary, sandalwoody, tobacco-y type thing from it, and it's definitely in my regular rotation. I think it's a nice addition to the overall collection of like I've of course leaned more towards the fresh stuff like Waves or the Atomic Holiday, which was kind of like fruity and citrusy, and I like that quite a bit. And I still, of course, am using the bar soaps. I keep forgetting to mention that the bar soaps are a huge addition because one, they're not just a guy thing. They're not just someone who shaves. They're for everyone in the house. And I know that you guys are into the soaps as well.
Every day. It's how I start my day. A cup of tea and some Barrister and Man soap.
You use it in the shower? Is that a whole body soap?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I do too. I use it in the shower. I'm still on the Figaros. That's the one that I have right now, but I think that one is unavailable right now. So I would love to get a hold of some Maryland soon.
Yeah, grab it. So anyway, if you want to save 15% off your first order of Barrister and Man products, head on over to Barrister and Man, MANN. And when you check out, use code TheDiveDown2023 for 15% off that order. Let's well know that you came to them as a listener of the Dive Down, and we appreciate it.
And if you want to buy some Barrister and Man in the UK, you can't use the promo code, but you can find Marilyn and Atomic Holiday and a lot of other fragrances at slickboys.co.uk.
So my friends, I have been trying to get back into some Modern, and because we've been so focused a little bit on Tyvar and the potential of Tyvar, and Discord stalwart Mickey S. Even had a 5-0. You can find him on MTG Goldfish there with his Devoted Druid combo list featuring 4 Tyvar. I tried playing some Tyvar again for kicks because, it was a deck that I was into back in the day years ago when it was not quite a tier 1 strategy, but close enough, I think. And the way that I picked this list off of Goldfish because Bean17H got 2 5-0s in a row with the same list, although the second time they swapped out 4 Noble Hierarch for 4 Birds of Paradise, which is what I ran. So effectively the same 75, just with different kind of mana dorks. I think Birds is strictly better than Noble in this list because it does run 4 Tyvar Stand, and Flyer plus Tyvar Stand plus Infinite Mana does give you a potential win con. So I think that's just a smarter out than Noble Hierarch. But anyway, this is pretty classic looking devoted list. It's got the 4 birds, 4 giver, 4 devoted druid, 4 stoneforge, 2 vizier, a few random one-ofs like extraction specialist, Burrington Forge Tender, and the walking ballista for your kill option. You got like the Tyvar, you've got your Eladamri's Call, you've got Tyvar Stand, so there's no Finale of Devastation in this list, and I'll get to that a little bit later, my thoughts on not having Finale. And then the Stoneforge package is like Luxior for pairing with Druid for your infinite mana. Viridian Longbow gives you a Druid win con if you're able to tap and untap it endlessly. And then, of course, Batterskull and Cauldra for your living weapon package. And I did want to get to the LGS to play this in paper, but then work was ridiculous. We had a pretty major systems outage, and I couldn't get the time to even get this all. You know how long it takes? When you're like, hey, I want to play this deck, and even though I know where all my cards are, it still takes you 45 minutes to get all the paper cards together, and it's just like a freaking nightmare. Yeah, and then you're getting there at 6:30 when it starts at 6:30, and you're super stressed out, and you're like, this was not worth my time. So I just played it on MTGO, and I did just a bunch of matches, as many as I could. I think maybe 8 or 9, all in the tournament practice room because I just kind of wanted to get my feet wet. I haven't run the Devoted Druid combo on Magic Online in a long time, so I was just kind of I don't even remember how this works. How am I going to tutor things correctly? And I'll tell you what, the deck ran fine. In terms of my ability to play it, Magic Online actually makes it easier than paper because you just get your whole deck displayed to you and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to grab this weapon and not forget the fact that I have some other weapon in there that's even, perhaps better at the time. But the unfortunate thing in my testing is that Tyvar rarely came up for me. That was the card I wanted to test the most. And I just didn't either see him or I didn't get the opportunity to play him because it made more sense at the time, to me at least, to do something else with the mana. And the most I saw Tyvar do was for an opponent because they Ragavanned me and got my Tyvar and then used it for like untapping their creatures and then getting a creature back out of the graveyard. And then they were doing like a weird Grixis. There was like a Grixis Ledger Shredder Ragavan type deck, and they Croaxed me, and then they Tyvar'd the Croaxa back the same turn.
Whoa.
Just to like shred my hand some more and make me lose some more life because I just had lands. I was just like trying to represent something else.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was like they got a lot of value out of it. And then like
so what you're saying is they got a value out of a free Tyvar.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
And once I post board, I was able to actually like I had the win. If my Tyvar resolved, I was going to get a Druid back. And I had a Vizier on board, and I had something to do with my mana. But then, like, my opponents enduranced me just to put an end to those dreams once I ticked Tyvar down. And I was like, man, like, I don't know if I'd bring in endurance against a Tyvar opponent, but I guess you kind of have to if you don't have much better else.
I mean, this is just like if they're using Tyvar to just combo off, like that turn.
Yeah, I think you might have to. You might have to have endurance against it just because like there is a value there. There's a threat of it. And if you had endurance in your sideboard and you didn't bring it in against Tyvar and they won with the recursion, you're like, well, what was I doing with my sideboard?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure this is like sample size stuff where it's like, I didn't really have a chance to show Tyvar's worth, but largely Tyvar was a non-factor for me. And so overall, the deck did feel like it did before. Like when it wins, it wins. Like I had a match where I won turn 3 twice, and those were like on mulls to like 5, or just if you don't have interaction and you have this, the certain right combination of cards, you just can win. Like, turn 1, the Luxior, turn 2, Druid, like turn 3, like have enough mana to equip the sword and just like make infinite mana and then go to town. Like that kind of stuff happens, and so that was pretty cool. But there's like some main deck cards in there, like Forge Tender and Extraction Specialist that are cute. But like what I really wanted is just more ways to like have infinite mana payoffs, as always. Where it's just like with this deck, you need the right combination of infinite mana creators and then infinite mana payoffs. And if you don't have those, like there's plenty of times where it's just like, yeah, I have the combo, but I have nothing to do with it. And I'm just like top decking towards like an Eladamri's Call or a Tyvar stand and hope that they don't have a blocker. Like, once I had infinite mana and I had a Lair of the Hydra, but they had like one tiny blocker and I didn't have like Giver of Runes to like give protection against that. So it's like, I can't even make a gigantic Lair of the Hydra and attack in because they just have like a chump blocker. So it's like, oh, that's frustrating. I think the build is just still not quite there. Like I was looking at a number of builds and it's like, how many Vizier of Remedies do you run? Like, do you care about that really bad draw because of you want more redundancy? So like, do you run like one of, and then more Finale of Devastations and more Eladamri's Call to like tutor it up when you need it? Or do you run like the full quartet of Eladamri's Call just for like tutors? Or do you want like Finale of Devastation, which gives you like an infinite mana sink to like make your creatures huge? And my build ran no Urza's Saga, and so I didn't have any ability to tutor up the Luxior as like kind of like one of your primary combo plans, which is something that people run of. That gets you Longbow, the Viridian Longbow. So those are both 1 mana. And so Urza Saga can tutor those up as like both enablers and payoffs. And so I think that that's also kind of like a nice ability as well. Gives you just more redundancy. Our buddy Doomwake, ran a similar deck in the Modern Challenge on Saturday and did a quick O2 drop with a pretty similar deck. So I'm just going to be like, yeah, this deck's bad. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's bad, but it didn't feel like drastically different to me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a lot of like reps. It's a lot of like knowing how fast you need to play this deck out, where it's like, am I going to play a naked Devoted Druid out there and like then expect to play the Vizier of Remedies or like an Eladamri's Call next turn to like go off with? It's just like, or do I play really slowly, try to get a Tyvar, play to be able to win on the spot type thing? There's a lot there.
I'm also just trying to think, like, what are you supposed to be good against? What is not interacting
yeah.
or disrupting you somehow? And like Hammer Time comes to mind as maybe one option, but everything else.
Hammer interacted with me really well when I played versus it. Like they had all the prismatic endings and whatnot, and I was just like, brutal. And also they're just really fast. Yeah, and they're just really fast.
I was
too,
gonna say,
so
not
it's
game
just
one.
like,
They don't usually have those cards, but game two, you might have a bit of that. Was it mono white hammer or was it blue white?
I don't remember seeing. I think it was just mono white.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Right.
You don't.
so
You're
right, Stan. There's so much to interact with you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's just so much.
And like likewise with Hammer, like I would think that you might want to prey on the decks that don't have game one interaction at least, but then an example of something like Hammer or even Amulet Titan maybe, like, are those decks not faster then? So I wonder what role are you trying to fill in the format with just having more consistency is one thing, but like you're not goldfishing.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if you mentioned Titan, I think there's a decent chance that Titan could be a good matchup for you if you're on Druid, because like you said, no game one interaction. They do have anti-artifact stuff in games 2 and 3, which is annoying because you rely on some artifacts, but also then you can do something like bring something back out of the graveyard, and they don't really have a way to interact with that all the time, especially because they don't always have Bajuka Bog anymore and stuff like that. So that's something to consider. I wonder, I don't know what else in this top is good against that. Mill, maybe, like if there was a lot of mill, it could be a thing as well.
Yeah, and then your Tyvar draws are bananas, cocoa bananas.
Yeah.
Assuming mill doesn't have a counterspell up, which they frequently do too.
Yeah, for what it's worth, there was, it looks like maybe two devoted decks in the sample that I did from the 10th to the 22nd. One of them was in 16th place, and the other one was in 10th place. One of them was piloted by Young Dingo to 16th place in a challenge. So there's a couple of results here, but it's not coming back, I think, quite the way that people thought either.
There are some new versions that I am noticing that are playing Atraxa. I don't know how exactly, but they are. I guess it's just like it's like, I think it's Bob and Cheese, which is a name that we've definitely heard before, and they're running a list with Fiend Artisan and a Singleton Atraxa Grand Unifier, along with things like Eladamri's Call, etc., etc. Like I don't really know how you're casting Atraxa. I guess just if you make infinite mana and have white, blue, black, you can get it out there. I don't really know.
Did you get to do the Skrelv thing?
Meaning like use it as protection? I never actually got to use Skrelv as protection. No, I used Giver like once. I mean, that's the thing too. Like you said, Stan. Like I want to move off this deck because we've got not a ton of time left. But like it's weird. Like you said, like other decks are fast and disruptive, and your like game plan of Giver of Runes into Devoted Druid, and you're just sort of relying on like not a super fast sequence, and then like the fact that they can also just have two removal spells, one that hits Giver of Runes, one that hits your Devoted Druid, and you're just stranded. So you just have to have a lot go right for this strategy, and I'm not sure the juice is worth that squeeze when you can play a deck that's sort of more resilient and more consistent at doing what it's doing. And it's not like other decks can't win on turn 4 or effectively win on turn 4 all the time, or even turn 3. So I don't know.
Yeah. This Fiend Artisan list that you were talking about is pretty cool. That's the 10th place list by Galatrist. They have it in the 217.
And that's the way you would get Atraxa onto the battlefield, is with Fiend Artisan, because that's the X Golgari hybrid, sacrifice a creature, etc., put on the battlefield. But I still don't know how you exactly do that because it's X or less. So I don't know.
I had someone do that against me in Pioneer, actually, in a Pio League, where they were just Fiend Artisaning into all kinds of crazy stuff, including Atraxa. It was pretty nutty.
Yeah, Fiend Artisan's cool. It's a cool card.
Yeah.
All right.
You said you had some cool decks for us, a few?
Well, I think we can skip that. Stan, did you have anything you want to talk about with Rhinos or what you've been doing? Or
I haven't played Rhinos in maybe a month. And then I played an Elves League just to dust off the cobwebs. It was a little hard. It was hard against mid-range. I think it's like, it's really fast right now and like having the 4 Quarter Calling main gives you like really cool combo kills out of nowhere. Because you just make so many tokens right now with this version and that's in Pioneer. but I've only played one league, and I kind of want to play some more and then see how it actually plays in paper. I just know that I'm nervous about Rakdos, and the mono green matchup is probably kind of what I'm hoping to deal with.
Yeah.
Basically anything that doesn't have point removal, really. Like Human seems like a good matchup too.
Yeah, for sure. You just get wider faster than them.
Yeah.
They do have Brave the Elements, of course, but maybe you can get lucky. So I'm just going to point out 2 decks that I thought were cool in the list that I saw. I'm not going to get deep into it for what it's worth. These are just a couple notes, because I do want to save time to open a collector booster and also hear a little bit from Stan before we have to get out of here. So, a couple things. One is there was a player, Hank the Obese, on Magic Online, who had a challenge win and a challenge 3rd place with mono white humans in Modern. No new cards in this deck, but this deck is Champion of the Parish, Esper Sentinel, Hopeful Initiate, which has seen some play in the Pioneer version, Luminarch Aspirant, Thalia's Lieutenant, Adeline, Pioneer Staple, Solitude, and Chancellor of the Annex, which I thought was a pretty interesting card to have in here, along with Shining Shoal and Amiria's Call, and then a bunch of just kind of like white lands. I thought this deck was pretty interesting. It had a couple of results that seemed pretty decisive. So that was kind of cool to see. I guess I should say I'm not entirely sure if they came in first in the Swiss or won the tournament itself, won the top 8 as well, but they were definitely first in the Swiss.
They've been on a pretty hot run lately where like they came in 3rd in a Modern Challenge too, a 7th in another one.
Yeah. So I don't know. Mono white humans might be something to keep an eye on in Modern. Seems like it has a lot of tools. There was also this kind of weird Jeskai mid-range deck that looks like it's really maximizing triggers. It's got Elish Norn. It's kind of a let me see if I can find it really quickly. It's 2 Elish Norn and like 4 Timeless Dragon was the thing that blew my mind the most in this deck.
Like, Timeless Dragon always appears.
I don't know why it's around sometimes. Like, what is going on with that? Jeskai Obosh mid. It's an Obosh deck as well. And it has Ragavan, Season Pyromancer, 2 Elish Norn, Fury, Solitude, 3 Timeless Dragon, 1 Teferi. That's pretty much the only thing that makes it. Teferi is the only thing that makes it Jeskai. And then it's got Lightning Bolt, March of Otherworldly Light, Prismatic Ending, Fable, Blood Moon. Like, it's a interesting build off of the red mid-range decks that we mostly see with Obosh that instead is essentially a Boros mid-range deck that has popped up a couple times. And this deck that I'm looking at in particular from Quafortre, with a 4 in the middle, was first place with the 6-0 in the 219 challenge. I think that might be worth looking at as well if you're looking for cool decks. I think those are the 2 ones that stood out the most to me. So Stan.
Dave.
Let's open a pack.
One of these?
Let's open a pack and also tell us some anecdotes. Do you have any other anecdotes about your move? What's been the hardest? What's been the easiest and the hardest part of settling into a new country?
Oh, wow. That's getting right into it.
That's a double barrel question, Dave.
You don't have to share that if you don't want to, but I'm just trying to prompt you.
Yeah, I mean, what's been the easiest? There's no real language barrier. That helps. So,
no real language barrier.
I mean, language barriers are real. We were in Berlin a few weeks ago for about a week. So it's cool that you can just like pop over to anywhere in Europe.
That is, I have to interrupt you and just be like, that is the number one thing I want to move to Europe for. It's like going to Connecticut. Oh, I went to Spain.
Right. Yeah. It's like a cheap 2-hour flight at most. And we were in Berlin for a week and just quickly inundated with the fact that like you can't read signage.
Yeah.
People are friendly enough, and like, especially in a city like big cosmopolitan cities, like they speak enough English that that's not a burden. But like having to use an app to just like buy stuff at a grocery store and understand the difference between like the milk in the refrigerator and the milk that's somehow shelf stable and warm. Like, what's that about?
Germany, get at us. Tell us what that's about.
All right. So let's look at this collector booster. I got a foil full art black and white Luca. That's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice. That's a legitimate card.
And a full art black and white Kemba, Ka Enduring.
Wow. Two full out rare, 2 showcase rares. That's pretty cool.
And a full art foil like the Phyrexian foiling Malcator Purity Overseer.
Oh, geez, it's a triple showcase rare. The
Is that a
Phyrexian
mythic
oils are kind of
or
hard
rare?
to come by too.
Is that a good card?
It's actually in a deck that I was going to talk about. There's a Jeskai Affinity deck that tries to trigger Malkalor or whatever to get a bunch of 3/3s.
Man, I forgot how many rares come in this because I also got a Vran, a foil Vran, Executioner Thane, a full art or borderless Mirren Safe House,
Right.
and a borderless Clever Concealment.
Wow. You did get some pulls though. The Luca is good.
Yeah. Put these in my butt. Do these foils curl? Do these Phyrexian foils curl?
Yeah, they all do.
They all
Sleeve
do.
them up.
I should make a video where I crack these packs. Like, since Wizards was kind enough to send them to me, we should make some content out of it, huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, so the easiest part is everyone in England speaks some form of English, and everyone in Manchester, especially, like, no joke, is so nice. I think they're charmed by the fact that I'm American. There aren't really a lot of Americans here. I've not met any other Americans. Actually,
Interesting.
maybe that's not true. We were having burgers last week at a place called Almost Famous that refers to itself as an American burger joint. And
Okay.
we were served by this person who had a British accent, and he's like, where you all from? And we said Chicago, and he's like, yeah, it might not sound like it, but I'm from Florida. I actually grew up in Florida, but my parents are English, and then we moved back here. So I just always had a British accent, even though I kind of consider myself semi-American.
That's funny.
But I will also add another nice thing is the weather here is phenomenal for wintertime. Like, compared to what Chicago winters are like, it kind of feels like spring here. So I'm looking forward to what the next few months hold because it can only get warmer.
I mean, you did move from like one of the nastiest winters in the U.S.
Yeah.
Chicago is horrible in the winter.
It's so bad.
I got to
It's so
say,
bad.
this year, for what it's worth, it's been extremely mild. There's only been like 3 snowstorms. We had one Friday night, and it's already gone. So it's been a really mild winter this year. However, there certainly are plenty of times where it's like -30 here randomly.
Yeah,
So-
and it's never really dropped below 35 since I've been in Manchester, and that was like a weird fluke, and everyone was like, why is it so cold? And it's just kind of been like hovering between 45 and 55 since I got here in January.
Wow. That does sound pretty nice.
It's fantastic.
It's hitting the mid-40s here today, and I'm like taking the kids to the park after this. It's like, oh my God, it's above freezing. We have to do something outside. Run to the park. Go.
Yeah, I don't know. I almost feel like we can make a whole episode out of talking about my observations about England. Like, there's a lot of good things about just sort of like the culture. It's very chill. Even in Manchester city center, which is a bustling urban metropolis, like, people just are nice, and I don't feel like I'm getting pushed around.
That's what happens when you escape capitalism, Stan.
Yeah.
is
Oh, okay.
Everything becomes chill.
All right. So let's talk about capitalism real quick.
Real
Guys,
quick.
I have to go to the park with my kid.
Real quick. So
Let's make this some bonus content, Stan.
obviously I have not escaped capitalism, but I get this weird sense that the culture I'm living in now, and maybe it's a Mank thing, I don't know, but it doesn't feel as materialistic. And part of that is houses are smaller, okay? And commercial real estate is more sparse. And sometimes it's kind of a burden where I'm like, for me to walk to a store, I have to walk like 20, 30 minutes. And in Chicago, like, there's like places, like there's Targets and Walgreenses, and everything is like always 5 minutes away. You kind of just have to like make a point to go buy stuff. And when you go to a grocery store, like, they're smaller here than they are in Chicago, at least. And when I was looking for the house that I'm in now and just like seeing people's homes, it just felt like people didn't have as much stuff. Like, whereas in America, we were drowning in stuff and we brought too much stuff over, and there's just less stuff here.
Interesting.
I'm not saying it's a more evolved culture and that materialism does not exist here, but it feels like it's a little bit less of an identity than maybe what I kind of was used to in Chicago. Maybe people here have a little bit as much or more vanity, though. Like, I think that's sort of the trade-off is like materialism for vanity. Like, seriously, like in Chicago, there's like 20 tattoo parlors on a single city block. And tattoo parlors are a little less common here, but when we were living in the Didsbury neighborhood, I had never been in a single city neighborhood that had so many barbershops and hair salons. Like they were like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts combined. Like there were just so many barbershops on a single street. It was insane.
Interesting.
I think people just get a lot of haircuts.
No, I've noticed that around where I live, Stan. It's just like when you look, there are way more salons than you think there are. I don't understand how it works, but this is definitely some future conversation topics, and probably not the dive down, because I'm withholding any comments I have about my thoughts about some of the topics that you were bringing up.
About capitalism and materialism.
Yeah, I might not want to talk about it on pod.
Okay. All right. That can
also know that
dive
we also
down after dark.
Oh, perfect. I can't wait for those.
I can see the sun seems to be going down behind you right now, Stan, and so your lighting has gotten amazing in the last 20 minutes, where the room behind you has gotten slightly darker, but you're still like warmly lit, so it looks way more like composed at moment.
Well, so I'm facing a brick wall that does have like some light fixtures attached to it. So
nice.
my lighting is cool. Last thing I'll say that I didn't realize before I moved here is that Manchester is a microclimate, because I'm in a valley surrounded by mountains. And it's not like Denver, right? I'm not looking at like the majestic white peaks of the Rockies, but if I look out of either of these two, because I'm in an attic and I have these two windows on either side of the attic, any direction I look, like I see tall hills and mountains in the distance and wind farms. And that contributes to, I think, maybe what our mild climate comes from, perhaps. But then you get like random like drizzle in the middle of the day sometimes. So I don't know. It's fun. I really like it. I can't wait for you guys to visit. I don't think all of UK has the microclimate, because we just have like this weird northern mountain range, and
sweet.
That
can't wait.
Kind of like colors the countryside.
I miss the colors of the countryside. We'll have to wait for that.
We'll keep doing this. I'll keep sharing anecdotes about the dive down, or about Manchester, next time we record together. I don't know if the next episode we're going to record together. It might be us doing some experimentation.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 100% out. I am gone next week, as I mentioned to you all, because I
wasn't sure if it was the next one. Okay.
Yeah, I've got a work trip. So.
Are you coming here?
No, I'm going to Salt Lake City. It's a lot like the UK.
It is. Yeah.
It's very much its own microclimate, I've heard. So Stan, you and me have to figure out when we can do it next week. Let's keep talking.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, I guess that wraps up this week's show. I can't believe I get to read the script again. It's like coming home to a warm hug of show notes. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast, you can reach out by tweeting at The Dive Down, all one word, emailing thedivedown@gmail.com. We have some emails to catch up on. I've been out of office for a month. You guys stopped responding to our kind emailers, so I guess I'll do that this week. I've seen the emails come through. I just haven't gotten around to answering them, so we'll do that sooner. I think one of them wants a recipe from you, Dave. So maybe you can.
Oh, I will take a look right now.
I'll make a Jira ticket for you.
Thanks. That is how I live my life, so I appreciate it.
If you'd like to support the show, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown, and also check out the store, thedivedown.com/store. Get a t-shirt. Wear it with pride. Shout out to Manatraders for sponsoring The Dive Down. If you sign up for a Manatraders account using promo code TheDiveDown10, all one word, you will get 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. That is 10 the number, TheDiveDown10. And also get some amazing shaving soap, body soap, fragrances, and more at Barrister & Mann using promo code TheDiveDown2023. 15% off your first order there. And of course, save some money on paper cards at Nerd Rage Gaming with the code DIVE8. Dive and the number 8 for 8% off your first order from NRG. Special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and carry on. Have a good show. Cheers, mate. Bye.